Okay, here is my assessment 3 for development and learning 2020, stimulating effective learning. I'll start with a little bit of an overview of the lesson context and go from there. So the lesson that I designed for this assessment was taught to a class of Year 7 English students on Friday of week 1 in term 4. So there are 28 students in the class, and this lesson was the last one in the introductory week to the advertising unit, which is a new topic this term. The first 2 lessons preceding this had introduced students to the topic of advertising and elicited any prior knowledge about the subject. The students were introduced to the 2 main purposes of advertising, and they had the opportunity to practice identifying the purpose and target audience of a series of print advertisements. In terms of the why, over the course of this unit, students are learning to evaluate texts for their social and aesthetic value using the relevant and appropriate meta-language. That's actually an outcome from the Australian curriculum. They will also be able to understand and explain how the structures and language features of text become more complex in informative and persuasive texts, in this case advertising, and they'll be able to identify the underlying structures of text that contribute to their meaning. So that's another link to the Australian curriculum. This unit is also linked in with the HAS unit that the students will study this term. In HAS, students are studying a business and economics unit in which they create a company and a product that will be sold in a market in week 8 of term 4. For that, students need to be able to design their own advertising for their products, so they will plan, draft and publish informative and persuasive text, selecting aspects of subject matter and particular language and visual features to convey information and ideas. And that's the last Australian curriculum outcome that we're focusing on this term. But basically, overall, students are learning to deconstruct ads and in all different forms and interrogate the underlying power structures within them in order to become critical consumers. Within this particular lesson, we are continuing to consolidate the students' understanding of the purpose of advertising, as well as introducing students to the structural features of advertisements and some of that meta language. There are 2 learning intentions and 2 corresponding success criteria. So within this lesson, students are learning about the structural features of advertisements, and they are learning about the purpose of advertising. They will be able to identify the structural features of 3 advertisements of their choice, and they'll be able to suggest reasons why those structural features have been included. So suggest reasons as to their purpose. To briefly talk about constructivism, what I have on the screen is a very brief overview, and I'm just going to talk about it in a little bit more depth. So the constructivist theory of learning is a cognitive approach to explaining how learning happens. The underlying principle of the constructivist theory is that learners are active constructors of their own learning. Knowledge is constructed by the learner and informed by the learner's previous experience. The constructivist approach assumes that humans process information in meaningful ways, and that this process leads to the development of schemas, and that learning occurs when these schemas are being built upon or being modified. The thinker is physically and mentally active in the construction of knowledge and can self-regulate the learning process. The constructivist approach also states that learning is supported by social interaction with peers and adults as learners develop. So as learners interact with their environment, they link new information from their current experiences to their previous knowledge, and in doing so, they construct new knowledge and meaning. Teachers, when they're teaching from a constructivist approach, recognise the value of the knowledge that students actually bring to learning and provide experiences for their students that can help them to build upon their current knowledge. Learner-centred experiences and processes, collaborative and cooperative learning, and assisting learners to develop their expertise through a cognitive apprenticeship are 3 categories of constructivist learning, which I have on the next slide here. These ideas also underpins the development and execution of the lesson that I prepared for this assignment, and I'll refer back to these as well when I'm talking about that. In terms of what kind of ICTs I included in the lesson and how they supported the constructivist approach, The main tools that I used were a PowerPoint presentation. The students used laptops, and through the laptops they access a Canvas discussion board, Microsoft Word, and Google Images. So the lesson begins with the teacher introducing the structural features of ads using a PowerPoint presentation. The PowerPoint is then used to display a series of ads from an advertising campaign. Having the ads displayed on the screen actually allows the teacher to conduct a think aloud about the different structural features of the ads and what their purpose might be. In this part of the lesson, the teacher is acting as the expert. They're also using a visual aid to aid student understanding. The teacher also models the cognitive activities for the students in such a way that the students can observe the thinking process of the teacher. And also during the think aloud, the teacher has the opportunity to link students' new learning, which is the structural elements of the ads, to their existing knowledge. So that's the purpose of the ads that students have already started to look at. The main tool, as I said, that students used during this lesson were laptops. The school is equipped with around 45 laptops per 100 students, and about a third of this particular class bring their own laptop. The students worked in pairs, and so they shared a laptop between two people. So the link here, or the way that the constructivist approach is supported here, is that this is very much a learner-centered activity. The pairs can collaborate and build that shared meaning and understanding of concepts. It's also a very authentic activity as students interact with these ads in online contexts in real life. And so this gives them an opportunity to actually be in that real life context and looking at ads that they might actually see when they're in that environment. And a quote from Hattie here says that computers are more successfully used in pairs than when used alone. The students copy and paste the ads into a Word document and provide a brief description of the structural features of each ad and what effect these structural features have on the audience, and make suggestions as to what the purpose is of each of those structural features. They then choose their favourite ad or description and post it to a discussion board on Canvas. Once they've posted, they can like and reply to other students' posts. The discussion board is also able to facilitate authentic learning because the students are actually writing for a real audience, their peers, about a topic that's extremely relevant to them. This also increases student motivation because they can see the relevance of the learning in a real-world context. The discussion board itself gives our students the opportunity to build a shared meaning and collaborate both in their pairs and as a whole class. The final activity was that students had to individually post a response to one of their peers' posts with either a question or something that they thought was interesting. How I supported or responded to the needs of diverse learners. There are a few ways that I did this. The first one was through extra scaffolding for the supported students in my class. So just in order to make things a little bit more straightforward for them, I provided them with a template for analysing the ads that they chose. And the template had explicit questions and then spaces left blank for students to write their answers. One particular student, instead of actually writing an analysis of the ads, created an ad for a company. He had to include a logo, slogan, imagery, and a website link. This supports Gardner's multiple intelligences theory, as it allowed that student to express their understanding in a different domain in which they feel more comfortable and confident. I offered choice for the students, so I got them to find 3 ads for companies and brands that they like to encourage a sense of autonomy in those learners, and this motivated students who might otherwise have been disengaged with the task. And this links into self-determination theory. So people have a basic need for autonomy, a sense of competence and relatedness to others. And I catered for this in my lesson by offering choice, providing extra scaffolding to ensure a high chance of success, and by pairing the students together. I also provided some opportunities for students to demonstrate their verbal understanding, like in the group brainstorm and activating prior knowledge stage. In terms of whether this was a meaningful and engaging learning experience for the students, I think this quote is really interesting, and that it sums up some of my previous experiences with ICT in the classroom. And so I was really determined for this lesson to be informed by sound educational principles and theories, particularly constructivism and the gradual release of responsibility model. So quantitatively, in terms of, I suppose, measuring success, 13 pairs submitted a Word document and a post to the discussion board. 22 individuals responded to posts by other pairs on the discussion board. When I was marking the students' work against the success criteria, I found that 7 of the pairs had achieved the success criteria. 5 pairs were sort of almost there, so showing some understanding, and 2 pairs had written very little and did not achieve the success criteria. And there was that one student who made the visual ad and labelled the features that he included. Qualitatively, from my own observation, the students were more engaged and required less redirection to the task than they had in similar previous lessons, although students spent a long time looking for the ads and talking about the ads and not as much time writing. In some of the pairs, it was quite obvious that one student was completing most of the work. And so in terms of some improvements for what I would do in future ICT lessons or future lessons that follow a similar constructivist approach is be explicit about what each person within the group needs to achieve and actually allocate roles. Provide an explicit opportunity for the students to individually reflect on their learning during the lesson. It would have been nice to know what they actually thought that they had achieved alongside what I thought they had achieved. So, and I know that metacognition is a vital part of students constructing meaning and consolidating that new knowledge. I'd also ensure that students knew exactly what was expected of them. For example, like provide an exemplar piece of work that the students can strive for. It was quite obvious in some of the pieces of work that they submitted that they weren't exactly sure what that was supposed to look like, and it didn't demonstrate a great depth of understanding. And the last one, I would provide timing or time guidelines for how long students should spend on each part of the task, just to ensure that they are really putting some time into their writing.